Walking Dead, a podcast pulverizing episodes beyond the Walking Dead universe, and beyond even that. I'm your host, David Cameo, and I'm joined by Sharon D, aka Blazing Gardner, and Bridget, aka Punky Brewster. ko-fi.com/Punky Brewster. That's PUNKYBRUISETER. Yeah, sometimes you have to just put yourself out there. Sometimes you shouldn't. We're covering the third episode of The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon, which is Paris Sera Toujours Paris, which means Paris will always be Paris. First of all, keeping in mind the fact that this episode was kind of, sort of, all over the place, IMHO, as opposed to the first two episodes, which had some pretty steady pacing, feels like not too much happened. First episode, quite a few things happened, and yet there was still a lot of character development. Second episode was a little bit slower, but it didn't seem to bother Rachel, who is my yardstick for things like that. But this episode, it seems like a lot happens, and we still get a ton of nuggets along the way, even though it starts off pretty slow.
I wish that I had had a chance to fully rewatch it and think about it before we were talking about it, because I really enjoyed it. But I feel like there was a lot to unpack and a lot of things that were in the background that I didn't have time to go back and look for. But I really enjoyed it. Like, the symphony, that just was like, whoa, that was awesome. But I kind of feel like what you said, it's all over the place. I feel like it was two separate episodes almost, because you have the first half where they're going to Paris and they meet the resistance fighters or whatever. And then the second half when they're actually in Paris. The visuals were amazing, as always. So
speaking about AMC, you were really mostly referring to the fact that we're getting these episodes early, but early as in 3 a.m. this morning, and it's now 1:30 p.m. in the afternoon, and you either have to stay up until 3 a.m. to watch it for the first time and then take notes, or be an idiot and take notes right away. But for me, I didn't even get the episode on the web until right when I needed to take notes. I did get it on my phone, though, so that's really weird. It's like this PTSD that we had during, I want to say it was Fear the Walking Dead season 7, where in many cases it didn't show up on AMC Plus for Amazon Prime. Mm-hmm. You had instances where it didn't show up at all.
I was paying for AMC Plus on Prime, and then I also ended up paying for a month on Apple TV just so I could watch it.
I got it through Amazon and it never showed up, and so I ended up going and getting AMC Plus. That's why I didn't do it through Amazon this year.
I'm mad about it because I like AMC Plus through Prime. I get Shudder and I get a lot of other content through it, but yeah, sometimes they screw it up. But it was up there at 5 a.m. when I watched it.
I can't tell you how many times I stayed up until 3 to watch it and it didn't show up. And I was
There's no way I'm staying up till 3 ever.
Mad. I quit doing it. There's no way. Because I was like, I'd have to go to work till the afternoon then, so it wasn't a big deal. I slept late anyway, but I quit doing it because I'm like, I'm staying up till 3 to watch this show, and you guys can't even get it up on time.
That's what she said.
AMC.
Like the tip of the Eiffel Tower?
Yeah.
Yeah, basically, if that's a good analogy. Anyway, Bridget, what did you think of this episode overall? Keeping in mind, yes, that this episode may, or you can disagree, have been a little bit all over the place.
Well, I woke up at 4 a.m. to say goodbye to my mother and my aunt. Then I went back to bed. Then I woke up at 5 a.m. and I watched this episode. And then I got up and packed up my hotel room and drove over 5 hours back to North Carolina, where I tried to watch it again.
From Tennessee.
Yeah, from Tennessee. And
in case
then
people wanted to know.
And now I'm here. So I'm exhausted and I can't have caffeine. I'm not allowed to. I really enjoyed it. So far, I think this was my favorite episode. I just think there were so many cool parts, so many little pieces, so many references to other things. Maybe it's the Jim Morrison thing. I don't know. Something about this episode's really doing it for me. I'm excited for the rest of this season. This is the ramp up. So from here on out, it should be action. I don't know what's going to happen, but it should be theoretically action.
Right. It should be noted that, now we're in the big city. So,
well, and there's only 3 episodes left.
Dead City. Right.
Just a quick note. Once again, Daryl shows up to a settlement that's doing pretty well. And within 24 hours, it's being raided and destroyed.
To be fair, to be fair, they were so cavalier about the level of information that they're providing people. Someone mentioned this.
You're saying Falu's group.
Somewhere, yeah. Someone mentioned this somewhere, that how unlike Daryl it was to leave behind a recording of himself. And I just thought, yeah, but why would Daryl ever assume someone was going to be looking for him? He's in a
Okay.
foreign country. He's traveled so many miles away from the spot where he jumped out of a boat.
But not only that, but he probably forgot all about the recording. Like, he had so much other stuff going on. That was just something he had stuck in his pack. And like, I have other shit to do. You got other shit to worry about.
This is not like our group in America. Super tight-lipped about things, automatically suspicious of other people. There's like this sense of like community amongst these people, which I think is really dangerous. But that's the classic Western civilization versus the Eastern side of the world, because we value independence. That's like a huge American trait. People have done like studies on this. Like, Americans are considered rude by other countries because we value independence. So like in another country, you would ask how to get somewhere, and that person that you ask would probably walk with you there to show you the way. Because
to make sure you get there.
That's how it is there. And in America, because we value independence, we tell you how to get there and then we let you do it on your own. But that's viewed as rude. You wouldn't even offer to walk
Inhospitable,
me.
right?
Yeah. It's interesting to see this dynamic that is truly European in nature, and for me to be like so suspicious of it. The fact that they know Falou by name, they mention the rooftop in front of other people. Everyone now knows in this club, like, where you're from. That's dangerous, isn't it?
Well, unless everybody's on equal footing and everybody else is just like him, or not like him, but similar to, meaning people kind of know everybody else's game.
It's just very different from what we've seen previously.
I definitely hear you, because that did cross my mind, and I kind of wrote it off as some sort of, I don't know, these guys are semi-religious. They have ties to this order, this idea of...
Yeah, I mean, the Union of Hope.
That would explain RJ Gaines being the way he was, because instead of sharing with the community, he took it all and hoarded it to himself.
Because the American trait is...
God damn it, I'm an American!
Well, the American trait is... I mean, I believe in helping others, not only as a Christian, but just like as a person. Like, feels icky if you're not. But I could see there being like that value in independence and focusing in on that. And that being like something just so ingrained in you based on the country that you come from.
Isabelle says while she's at the rooftop with Falou and everybody else, Laurent starts taking in alms, little alms for the church, for himself, whatever it is, because he's the guy. He's the guy, you know, he's the guy. And Daryl's saying he's the one who lived, technically. And Daryl says it's kind of a lot to put on a kid. And Isabelle says, God chooses our burdens, which immediately hit my brain like a lightning bolt, because the expression that I usually hear is, and I love this expression because it really helps you shift perspective. I'm not saying I'm a self-ascribed stoic or anything like that. I'm not a nihilist, and I'm definitely not an existentialist, but as more of a stoic thing, it reminds me of, and I can't really even remember the source of this quote, and I actually really did some work trying to find it. We choose our suffering, which is more born out of Jean-Paul Sartre and Friedrich Nietzsche, that sort of nihilist existentialist perspective. So it's such a contrast. You're talking about contrast between the values of liberty and independence. Well, specifically, this idea of we choose our suffering accentuates personal responsibility and personal freedom over relinquishing your burdens or taking on burdens from a higher power. So this is, you have the power, you have the agency, you manifest your own destiny, you work hard, you get paid, etc. Everything is in your hands. And it's this perfect thing where this moment happens. Daryl and Isabelle have an attempt at reconciliation by the end of it, where Daryl's kind of like, you're making up story. Make up a good story about me leaving. You're good at it. And then she's firing back and they're firing back. He's talking about telling the truth. She's like, well, the truth is hard, essentially, and horrible. Laurent comes out and he says, I hate both of you. And it perfectly dovetails into this perfect conversation that we're having right now about, okay, well, yes, you can be too self-reliant. You can be too independent, let's say, or you could be too cooperative. And both things could be seen as bad. Maybe the truth does suck. And it does a lot of the time. The truth sucks. But we all believe in something. And it's actually baked into our nature to believe in something too. And maybe it's evolution or an evolutionary something that we acquired across our our journey as humans throughout the ages. It's a very interesting philosophical conversation that I'm having at you.
That you're having at me.
That's basically what it is. And this episode is rife with this theme of going back and forth between self-reliance and cooperation. as well.
Actually, I felt like the theme of it was more
There's a lot of themes. I just want to make that clear.
going
This is one of
around
them.
and around, right? Because we had the records. We had Jim Morrison's record at the gravesite. And
Well,
we
the song
had
kind of
record-
repeats too.
We had the record at the symphony.
Ravel.
And
Ravel,
then
yeah. The bolero.
Falou says when they're walking through the catacombs, America is an infant. We've had many apocalypses and we've lived through them all. Basically, it's going around and around. We're experiencing just one more
Everything's
apocalypse.
cyclical.
Because in the Black Death, a third of the population died.
I want to say even more. 2/3.
I don't think it was 2/3.
Or maybe it was
I think
40%.
it was like it was somewhere between like a third and a half of the population.
I mean, it doesn't
But
matter.
either
You would
way-
have thought the world was ending. I mean,
Right. Either
yeah.
way, everybody around you is dying, and there's nothing you can do to stop it, and there's no way to protect yourself. For them, that was an apocalypse. Now, the people who died didn't come back and try to eat you, but the fleas jumped off of them onto you and bit you, and you died too. So, and here's Daryl wanting to circle back to America. Isabelle coming back to Paris, full circle.
Oh yeah, running into Quinn again. Yeah,
Mhm.
you're right. You're right.
You mean, so you're saying that the theme is revolution because of revolution?
Well, I mean, sure. It could. I mean, it could be.
But I wanted to touch on something that you'd said, though. Going back to our conversation about independence versus cooperation, part of the reason that I think anthropologists were kind of really trying to break down how, I mean, obviously it was the fleas and the rodents that spread the plague, but also Parisian culture too. So when you greet someone, you do the kisses on the cheek, etc. Somebody had said this, and I can't remember who it was. I think it was on Reddit. It was like one of those passing notifications that you kind of see. Why are they always touching each other on these shows? Or at least in this show, at least. And I was thinking to myself, well, you know what? That makes a lot of sense because a lot of people say that the reason for that, aside from like the lack of bathing as well and hygiene, and why the Jews were mostly blamed because we have ritual hand cleansing before meals and stuff like that. So we were like the prime suspect number one at the time. It is this tactile culture of kissing on the cheek and embracing and breathing on each other.
Well, like the intimacy of their
Fleas
culture.
hopping. Exactly.
Yeah.
Which, again, Americans are not prone to do. I mean, there's the handshake, sure. But by then also, we learned a little bit more at the time.
Well, you remember COVID. I grew up that shaking a hand was the polite thing to do. And all of a sudden it was impolite to offer it.
Yeah. We did the whole elbow bump thing. We couldn't even do a fist bump after a while.
Stupid.
So.
Or people could just try washing their hands instead of being
I
gross.
wonder if
It's
the
fine.
cultural prevalence of the closeness in Europe is based in how much smaller the country is, the land
continent.
mass.
Mm.
Because in America, we've not so much now because we're very built up, but historically we've been very spread out because America is a huge country and we spread out the population. Europe is relatively small compared to the US. With the population, they are forced to be in closer. Because they are closer physically, they're more likely to be closer among them persons.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that had to do with any country, like during that time period, because it was like you didn't have ways to long form travel successfully. That's why the East Coast of the US was so built up for so long in comparison to further inland and then to the West Coast, because all of those cities were built as these areas where everybody's surrounded, because it was easier to live within 5 miles of town than it is to live 30 plus miles from a town. Suddenly now, are you dying because you're too far away from the doctor, or
Right.
you can't get food during a snowstorm?
But I can't get my Uber Eats. No,
But
sorry.
we
I don't know why I
were
haven't thought.
we were infants when that happened. Like these cultures went much longer with that being like a base requirement of life.
Well, also, you have to keep in mind that the plague actually happened during one of the biggest boom in terms of trade. You had the expansion of the caliphate at the time, too. So, you're talking about crusades, caliphate. There was massive amount of trading between the North African countries and Europe as well. And things were moving very rapidly. People were engaging with people rapidly. And then all of a sudden the plague happens, wrecks everything. And so,
yeah, I mean, it wasn't just Europe. It was Africa, Asia, everybody.
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, it wiped out.
Because of the trading.
Right. Well, because the rats would get on the ships and the ships would go to the ports and then they would get off and they would bite the people. Well, not the rats, the fleas on the rats.
Right. In the Middle Eastern, more Muslim cultures would kiss 2 times and then the French would kiss 3 times. And it's a whole thing. So
people thought they could escape it by getting out of the cities, but you took the rats with you when you
Yeah.
traveled to the countryside, and you still got it there. So
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
there was no escape. I guess it kind of is like the zombie apocalypse. There is no escape. There's nowhere that's safe.
Right.
You're going to be attacked no matter where you go, what you do.
And the miracle, again, to touch on this piece of the show, is that you are alive to begin with. And maybe it's not that you're the Messiah. It's maybe that you're just a very lucky kid in a very horrible world. And so all of us are the Messiahs. We can be heroes just for one day.
Okay, Keanu.
I'm sorry, that was Bowie. Damn it.
Yeah, but they played it in The Replacements, and Keanu Reeves was in that. So,
Great movie, by the way.
Yes, it is. That's one of my favorites.
It is a really good movie.
I feel like the fact that one of the zombies that fell out of the window was a fire zombie or acid zombie or whatever. We were thinking that maybe it was experiments that made that happen. But if that dude's just been locked in their apartment since they died, like, I don't think experimenting has anything to do with the acid
burners.
Zombie.
I assume that the experiments then somehow were freed. You know, that's happening.
But
the world.
why would only one be a burner and all the ones around them not then?
Or two. I think it was two.
It was two.
Yeah.
But there was a whole bunch of bodies falling, so why would it only affect two?
I know, but what if
it's
like, what if it has to do with some sort of genetic marker that you have to have?
Or that you exploit too.
But maybe that's natural. Maybe it's natural if you have a certain genetic makeup, because the genetic makeup of people in France are going to be significantly different than the genetic makeup of people in America.
I wouldn't say that.
Mm-mm.
If you're of French descent, you might have the same marker, but...
Yeah, but that's like rampant in the South, specifically in like Louisiana. They'd be so close to that, I feel like.
But we haven't been to Louisiana.
We haven't.
We have actually for like a second.
Oh yeah, we did for a second.
Dead.
Yeah, we did for a second. We were so excited about it that we immediately left.
We're not giving people a little bit more context. What you're saying is basically, as a result of watching this episode and seeing Genet's experiments, the thought occurred to you, just like it did for me, that perhaps the burners were yet another attempt at maybe. Well, that's the question really that we need to explore.
talked about this already in a previous episode.
No, we talked about the science, but we didn't talk about the cause.
I was thinking of the original French experiments, like where they talked about the violet and
all the more reason to give context.
And all that.
Yeah.
So we were thinking that maybe they experimented and created them, but I think that it's more maybe a natural occurrence. And maybe there's something in that person, like you said, genetics. Maybe there's something in that person's genetics that didn't go transfer to America. Or it's in places of America that we haven't seen yet, because we've only seen a very limited area.
And we've only seen a few variants of our own in the US, let's say, in these shows. It's up for grabs, but if you want to talk greater context, I'm starting to think, but again, I'm not sold too much on this theory, is that maybe for my cup of tea, I feel like the burners may have been some sort of experiment gone wrong in trying to eliminate. And the reason for that is partially because of what we see in this episode, Genet's group, Pouvoir des Vivants, which Caudron is an ancillary member of. We should bring that up as well. They're experimenting on this walker in this episode. It gets very aggressive and then dies. It just oozes, it explodes.
Very strong.
Yeah, it's very strong, very aggressive, very fast.
Strong.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so you think to yourself, okay, on first watch, I was thinking, oh, they're trying to make them stronger. And then on second watch, I'm thinking to myself, wait, no, it's quite possible that they're pushing through their enhanced attributes in order to end them sooner. Because it's quite possible that what they're trying to do is accelerate their demise, let's say.
That's what I felt like it was. They were trying to kill it in a way that didn't involve interacting with it.
Right. That's what I thought too, that they were trying to figure out a way to make it die faster. They wouldn't have to. Right.
Hence the reason why they were trying to do it on the boat, right? Our whole thing about the boat was that they did it so that they can limit the casualties and collateral damage. But Daryl ended up ruining that as well. So it's good that we all agree that may have been the case. I'm just thinking that the burners on a side note could have been one of those things. And I'm basing this a little bit not just off of what we see in this episode, but also in The Walking Dead World Beyond. In the very last episode, and even some of the preceding episodes about fungus that Hope brings up in T. Brooks Ellis's class at the end. She mentions it there. And in the very last episode, it seems like they're making progress in terms of work in order to curtail or further reduce the walker population. It seems like whatever they're doing may be working. They're doing some science. And so I thought maybe Genet and her group, because they were formed since the fall, so maybe they've gotten ahead of this thing, that maybe this was their first attempt. That maybe they were trying to disintegrate the walkers from the inside, and instead they kept the disintegration thing as an attribute. And maybe they're just like walking all over the place, disintegrating things left and right as they bleed or ooze or whatever.
I thought it was really interesting to see. I don't know. It was almost like stop motion, the way that it stood up and
You mean
lurched
CG?
forward.
The one that dropped from the
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure
building?
it was CG, but it looked really stop motion to me. The jerky movement.
Well, because it's movements where like it's all the bones are kind of
Yeah,
cracking
it was
back
like
to
really
place
weird.
too.
It was
When
super
one
weird.
of them fell, I swear for a second it looked like it was bad editing.
Okay,
And it
because I
looked
was
like
thinking
they
that.
stopped right before they hit the ground and then went down. I don't know. I was like, wait, that's weird looking. It just struck me as weird. I don't think it was anything they were trying to do to say walker wise. I think it was just a small mistake. It just, boom. Like, it just was weird.
Well, it could also be the CG trying to interact with the physical environment too. So it's hard to kind of match
Yeah,
up.
I mean, again,
right?
this wasn't really a complaint. It was just something I noticed. Like,
Something you
that was
noticed, yeah.
that was a
I
little
get
odd.
it. Let me read what Takir says. The fact that we have never seen them anywhere else is what makes me feel like they didn't occur naturally. When you put all the shows together, we have covered a good portion of the USA. I think we should have seen at least a couple of burners by now, is what she thinks.
We're missing like a huge chunk of the Midwest, though.
And even Texas in some senses.
Maybe
just after
maybe
the
it's
nuclear
bread
explosion.
related, like cordyceps. Like maybe the people that ate baguettes
Substrate.
turned into burners.
Too much bread in the diet, or maybe the butter. Too much French butter. A pâte de beurre. Let's talk about the beginning, what we originally wanted to talk about, which was the musician. Let's keep in mind that this was the detour that Isabelle wanted to take to not go to Paris. So like, okay, let's just go around Paris and finish our journey, let's say. And on the way, of course, Isabelle wants to acquiesce to Daryl by getting a radio and so that he could go home. On the way, obviously, the first place they visit is this musician. And I'm just going to say he's pretty nuts.
The title of the episode being Paris Will Always Be Paris. That's the name of a song by Maurice. I'm going to butcher this last name.
Chevalier?
Yes.
Okay.
Chevalier. This ties in a minute. Anyway, the song is just about like, no matter what happens, Paris will remain and stand strong, which is obviously a theme throughout this. The Eiffel Tower is still standing, even though it was hit by a helicopter. The catacombs, Falou talks about how Paris is we're still here, even though we've experienced all of these apocalypses. In terms of this guy, who we don't have a name for, as far as I'm aware of, the conductor, I guess is what I will call him. The conductor. He reminds me of the clown in Twisted Metal.
Because of his hair too. I mean, it doesn't hurt.
I mean, not really for that reason, but just like this, it's a trope. This is another trope. This is okay. I'm not mad about tropes. I'm not mad about this at all. A mentally unwell person completely devolving, succumbed by like the art or like the passion that they have. So similar to what we saw in Dead City, when we see that like weird art installation in that warehouse that Negan and
Armstrong.
Yes, thank you.
Right.
Armstrong.
Which reminded me of Meow Wolf.
Yes. So there's that really weird art installation that's like dead people and bones. And it's really interesting.
And the doll. Oh, okay.
Yeah. But it's like, it's very much someone like slowly succumbing to like
their passion,
but to the outside world it looks insane. This also reminds me of, I had never watched it before, I know, shame on me, but Travis just had me watch Amadeus not that long ago. Very much the same thing, right? Like
that was what I thought too. Amadeus,
succumbing to your passion, succumbing to your art. How truly European is like that thought? Like that is just like, you know what I mean? There's all these stories of like mad artists and mental illness and like creativity tend to kind of flow in the same vein. You'll often hear from people with bipolar disorder that
as she points to herself
that when
for
you're
the audio podcast,
when you are medicated, you lose like the ability to create in some way.
Or at least your passion diminishes as well. Your motivations.
It's like, yes, you have all of these low times, but then you have this period of mania where you're just like so able to create and like even in your depression you create sad songs or art that reflects like the sadness that you feel, and it's like this whole concept.
And you have to too. You're almost as a calling that's just pushing you forward. Some people used to call it the message of God, I think it was.
How interesting that ends up being in this, but that is a trope, but I wasn't mad about it. It was really interesting to see. And I liked that it gave us this snapshot. Again, I enjoy these snapshots of other people.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy seeing what else is happening in the world.
It made me think of Princess, because when we first met Princess, she had all of the
Juanita Sanchez.
The scenes set up in her little area.
Her little vignettes that she created.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
There was also a Silence of the Lambs shout out. I don't know if anybody caught it.
In that scene?
In that scene. If you look in the background, there's a body that is hung up and flayed, and the arms are out like this.
In the orchestra.
In the orchestra. Yeah. And if you remember in Silence of the Lambs, when he killed the policemen that were keeping him prisoner, he flayed one of them and hung him up from the rafters.
Yes.
And you can see that one in the back. If you look really close, you'll see it hanging up in the back.
That's pretty disturbing.
Yeah.
Methinks that one might have been alive before.
He was very creative.
My favorite part was the head with the harp.
Yes.
Right, hanging upside down from the neck hole.
Well, just like that the mouth was hitting the string.
The timpani cymbal guy that had the pole sticking out, and when he turned, it would hit the drums. And then the guys that had the horns stuck down in their chests, and they were like sitting on top of stools or whatever.
With their jaws missing? Yeah,
and they were just like, I had the horn come out. That dude was very creative with his...
A.K.A. Greg Nicotero in KMBFX.
Yeah.
Really. What gives you a little insight into this guy's madness, the composer's madness, was
the conductor, Dave. It's not his composition.
Conductor, you're right. Is the composer Maurice Ravel, who created the Bolero, is one of his last pieces, is one of the most famous pieces too.
Yes.
That's what they played in 10 when Bo Derek was running down the beach. That's every time I hear it, that's what I think of.
Yeah, well, and you're probably hearing the version that went over very well in the US, which was conducted by Arturo Toscanini. Until then, it was very reviled in France, and there were many reasons surrounding it. Some of them political, some of them copyright, some of them what they were trying to do is bring Spanish music or Spanish type of music to France. Regardless, rather than wanting to inspire dancing, Maurice Ravel, he intended for his work to be played in an open air setting with a factory in the background. His thinking was that there needed to be a little bit of chaos as well. His excuse was reflecting the mechanical nature of music.
That's what it was. I mean, it's orchestrated music. It all has a function. It's like that movie Dancer in the Dark by Bjork.
Oh, yeah. Well, she's in it, but it was by, I forget what his name is.
The composition is hers. There's a factory scene in it. That's what, when I read that portion, that he intended it to be factory, but often it was used for a ballet instead, and they made it be like a happy like dancing thing, like a woman was dancing on a table, and he's like, that's dumb. That's not what I want.
This is not what he wanted. As the story goes though, like in the premiere of and you probably know this too because you read it, in the premiere of this piece, the first time it was ever heard, a woman comes up, she stands up and shouts at Ravel, calling him mad. But his response to this, his remark to this was, yes, then you get it. You understand the music.
He wasn't there when that happened. He was told that after the fact.
Oh,
so
okay,
she hears it. This is the thing. The piece became popular, and he's like, I don't understand why this is popular. I didn't think people were going to like this.
Well, not initially. So in Europe, people didn't get it. But when they brought it to the New York Philharmonic, that's when it exploded. And the reason for that was Toscanini. It's because he increased the tempo, so it was a little bit more, I don't know about jaunty, but it was a little more passionate. People got understood it after that.
So yeah, so she's there,
which is interesting because Daryl's from America, and you know this European theme in America worked for some reason where it didn't work initially, at least in Europe.
I just thought it was cool that so she was there and she yells this, and so people tell him after the fact, because you're not going to be at every single place that's playing your composition, like it's not possible. Right. And he does say she understood the piece, which is just like this is pretentious. What else are you supposed to say in that situation?
But is it pretentious, or is it that idea of passions and insanity kind of go hand in hand?
It's a pretentious thing to say. Well, what else are you supposed to say to that when someone says that? They hear your music and they say that you're insane.
Oh no, that's intentional.
Of course you're going to be like, yes, she's the only one who truly understood.
So you're saying he's like Pee Wee Herman. He's like, I meant to do that. Rest in peace, Paul
Yeah,
Rubens.
I know, Paul
Sorry.
Rubens.
Yeah.
Anyone who's created anything knows that you always have to like come up with the line that like makes it look like, I don't care that that's what you think about it.
You know what? It's like the classic drama of the gifted child. You either become grandiose or you become depressed. And so he chose the former, which most talented, creative people do. And like I was saying before, out of necessity, out of compulsion,
Yeah.
out of a message from God. You just have to be that way or else you just succumb.
Well, the reason I wanted to bring up the Paris will always be Paris thing is that I thought it was interesting that they picked 2 pieces of music by a man named Maurice.
You weirdo.
If you would like to see a movie that kind of gives you what's going on in the composer's head and heart, there's a movie about Beethoven. And it tells like some of his backstory and stuff like that. But at the end, he's premiering a symphony. You're seeing what's going on in his head. It's beautiful. Let me look it up real quick.
In the beginning, the conductor says some interesting things when they're trying to talk to Daryl and Isabelle. He says, "Where is Brian?" You think it's a throwaway line. The "Where is Brian" shtick is how kids in France learned how to speak English. Where is Brian? He's in the kitchen. Where is Brian? He's on the grass.
I didn't get that.
See, he was illustrating, yeah, I can speak English too.
I figured it was something like that. I was thinking, Donde está el biblioteca?
Well,
right.
I mean, I figured it was with the like,
Brian is in
the
the
sky
library.
is blue, the grass is green.
Yeah.
Like that, I figured was...
Right. To take it even further, how crazy this Brian character is in all the children's teachings for decades. There's a comedian called, and you may have heard of him, his name is Gad Elmaleh. He's a French comedian who does his act in English, and he's actually a Sephardic Jew. So his routine goes as follows. I'm saying it in English because I know a little English too. I learned English in school when I was little, like all of you. We all had the same dumb class with that famous existential question that you just had to find an answer to. Where is Brian? Everybody laughs. Don't laugh. Stop laughing. Brian traumatized all of you as well. You didn't know who Brian was. You didn't care, but you had to find out where he was in the house in order to learn English. That was it. You had to find the members of Brian's family in order to learn English. And what happened? Where is Brian? And like an idiot, you calmly responded, Brian is in the kitchen. So this is like a great French routine that's French specific. It's so well known that people know about it. And every now and again in this specific routine, he would yell out, where is Brian? Brian in the kitchen. It's kind of like where is Spot in the US? See Spot run.
The Dick and Jane books, right? Yeah. The movie I was talking about was called Immortal Beloved. And it's from 1994.
Yeah, that's what it was.
It's got Isabelle Rossellini is in it, and Jerome Crabe and Gary Oldman. Excellent movie.
Isabella Rossellini.
I like how they framed the gargoyle in the opening shot. When they're going through the city at the very beginning, you can see the gargoyle framed in the shot.
I thought for a second, isn't that a little bit foreshadowing too? It's like yeah, dude, this is some chaos over here. Just maybe not. I'm just going to watch it from out here. I'm good. I can hear it just fine from out here. Okay, so outside, they say this and leave the conductor to his business. But of course, it draws walkers. And one of the first things that we see is Sylvie squaring up to shoot a very strange walker that is dragging a corpse behind it with handcuffs.
Do you remember how when we were covering Fear, this first part of the last season, that I said that something happened like a couple episodes in that made Shrike and her brother seem younger somehow?
Mm-hmm. The clothes.
Sylvie seemed younger to me in this episode. When we first meet her, all we know is that she's a nun and she like shanks that guy repeatedly. And now she seemed almost like not as exposed to this part of the world behind the walls of the Abbey. She was safe.
Right. Well, there's a discrepancy. In the first episode, like Kira would probably say, oh, Sylvie's a badass. And then when you see the scene, you're like, oh, is she a badass? Does she have a problem killing walkers over people?
Which is weird. Right on the head, Bridget, because since the beginning, she's been ensconced behind the walls of the Abbey, and she hasn't had to deal with the big open world. So now that they have her out in the big open world, not in the small enclosed world of the Abbey, she is lost and small because this is totally new to her. I'm sure that they rarely went out of the walls except when they had to.
Yeah. She is still young too, arguably.
She's
19, 20.
Yeah, 19, 20.
Yeah.
Yeah. The actor's 19 herself. Or as of the filming, she might have been 18.
And she's lived a pretty sheltered life too, as is kind of
there is that discrepancy in your brain that says, hey, she had no problem or no hesitation shanking a dude.
She
And
had to
yet
do
she
what she had to
can't
do, but it just made
But she's been conditioned
fight or flight, you're saying?
by keeping Father Jean
Père
and
Jean?
perhaps even Lily. They've been conditioned to not kill walkers.
That's the only takeaway that I have in my brain is that
That's true.
To dovetail with the idea that they haven't been too much outside of walls, they've kept the dead alive. And maybe, like we said in the last episode, there may be a spiritual component to how they view the zombie apocalypse.
That's dead on, Charity, because Isabelle doesn't want to kill Amy either.
There you go.
So that is, you're right. You're right. Thank you for saying that, because that does kind of adjust some stuff in my head then. Because Sylvie gives Daryl a look like she's uncomfortable with the gun, which surprised me. But it wasn't that she was uncomfortable with the gun. It's that she's uncomfortable protecting the horse by killing people. Now, they're not actually people.
But killing a person who has control of their faculties and is willingly attacking you is different from someone who is sick and doesn't know what they're doing trying to attack you.
Right.
They can see the difference, which, I mean, we know they're incorrect as far as maybe they're not. I don't know. I'm not judging. But anyway.
Yes, you are. It's fine.
Yeah. I didn't mean to. Anyway.
No, but we all are,
Stupid
though. In
Americans.
our heads, we're doing, you can
Damn
have
it, I'm an American.
but we can have two thoughts, right? We can say, well, we know that this isn't the case, but they know, and you're trying to be respectful to that belief, let's say. But what you're saying is, I'm going to say this, I saw The Pope's Exorcist with Russell Crowe last night, and it's similar to that feeling that, okay, well, if I harm the child who isn't responsible for his actions right now, well, I'm inadvertently harming an innocent bystander that is being controlled by whatever, let's say. And so it's not their fault. So what do I do here?
You wouldn't kill someone who you see as possessed. You would try to
You're trying to help
exorcism.
them. Yeah.
Oh, we're forgetting one important piece. Very important piece, hitting on what you said about Père Jean. But what if I kill this person and Laurent lifts this curse? I've just killed someone who would have been lifted from this curse eventually. That's the missing piece, which is why they kept Père Jean alive this whole time.
And not even that. Everyone who watches the show, I've heard this a bajillion times. So not Daryl Dixon, but just like the Walking Dead universe in general, always says there's no way that the zombie apocalypse would ever happen that quickly. There's no way that would ever happen. Which one, y'all gave each other COVID like so quickly. So shut up, you're idiots. Two, the fact of the matter is, as far as you know, that's still your mom.
Yeah.
You're gonna you just gonna murk her? No, because you think that somebody somewhere is gonna be able to save her. I'm rewatching the webisode series for some YouTube videos that I'm putting out.
The early ones?
Yes,
early webisode?
all of them. I'm gonna redo all of them.
Okay.
But in the very first one, in Torn Apart, there's a woman who she walks up to a car that is stopped. The door is open. The driver is unconscious on the ground, you assume, because that would be your assumption. And she walks over and tries to give her CPR, and the woman wakes up and bites her lip off.
The face off, yeah.
So obviously.
Well, going back though, so that first of all, that's great. But we have to be specific. I think we all kind of agree that in her mind, if this thing lifts with Laurent's Messiah powers, let's say, eventually, then she's just killed a person, according to her and her beliefs.
Yes, no, I get that.
And that's what we're supposed to be. That's supposed to be the takeaway from this interaction. Because it's not Aimee, right? And it's not Lily. It's not these people this is a random walker, let's say.
Yeah.
She just has no connection to them.
They have the luxury of being able to believe that because they're not constantly under attack. Safe behind the walls of the Abbey, they've only got one or two, maybe, walkers they've
Lily
had to
and
deal with.
Jean for sure.
And they don't constantly have to be fighting them and killing them in order to survive themselves. So they have the ability to have the luxury to say, we can keep these lost souls or whatever around. But if you're like our people were out in the open with no way to hide, you have to kill or you're dead. That's also a difference in their psychologies and in the way they're thinking about things, because had they been out in the real world for any amount of time and had to kill to survive, they might have a different outlook.
Well, it was the same thing with Herschel.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like he was far enough out.
What was the second season all about?
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting to see that dovetail, Rick respecting Herschel's wishes and even in this episode, maybe because he's really good at killing walkers, Daryl, in the end, knowing that this walker could be a threat, this Aimee walker, which, by the way, we have to say we were spot on in the last episode that we would eventually see the walker Aimee. I was in disbelief that this was the same exact person. She's in the same exact outfit, which tells you that she bid it that first outbreak in the courtyard waiting for her parents in the safety of the atrium. So rip Aimee. Just wanted to say that. It's a very sad thought. Second is he respects Isabelle's wishes and doesn't kill Aimee, even though it goes against every instinct that he has. And maybe it's because he has the luxury of his expertise. Let's say we can go that far into saying that, but it's also maybe there's a value to it. Maybe he's learning there's a value to even though in my head I'm screaming, you're doing her a kindness by putting her down. He still respects Isabelle's wishes. Whereas before in Madame Dubois, not Madame Dubois, sorry, Julienne, Daryl does take him out to allow him to rest in peace. It's just an interesting thought that we're thinking right now. And it does kind of go back to the idea of the spirituality and taking on burdens and accepting burdens and individuality and existentialism, where it's the way you choose your suffering and you decide how you want to go out.
The kids that they stayed with had no qualms whatsoever about taking out walkers, but that's because they've been living among them. They have to in order to survive.
Right. Your spirituality changes a little bit. It's been outside the walls of an abbey.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
I'm a Christian and I'd be putting down walkers if it meant that I was living, You have to adapt. I can't say that I wouldn't be inclined to do something like Sadiq, the concept of releasing them from the prison that they're trapped in. Now, I don't really believe that because I believe that once you die, you're gone. But that tradition of like laying people to rest.
Yeah. Well, and it follows even in the Jewish tradition where once you die, you have 24 hours to put them in the ground, because that's what was once a spirit in a body, something that is inherently holy. Even the vessel itself has that residue of your spirit, your soul, let's say. And so that too has to be treated with respect and put in the ground right away, not to be out in the open where it can be devoured by carrion, let's say. Bring up that trope, that little nugget and morsel, or on earth and where the pieces of your body could be defiled, let's say.
You don't want to watch someone you love turn into a monster anyway.
No.
Along with that. Yeah, exactly. And in walking among the living, it's a walking desecration. What was once a body that was used to perform good deeds, it's kind of like the reverse of what Michonne would say, and even Rick, about being alive, the value of being alive, even if you've done wrong. Well, you have a chance to do good. It's the exact opposite. The walkers, all they do is it's I need to feed. I need to feed now. I don't care about my limbs. What that were once a holy vessel for something else. It's defiling it just to get that food. It's the essence of id. It's I want, and it's walking around and causing destruction. So it's walking defilement.
But does that change when you use those for something good? So let's take example.
Like a cart, like in a horse.
Well, I was thinking more like when they used them on the donkey wheel in Fear.
Right, to get the oil from the ground, right?
They were using them to create the power to create the gasoline, which they then use to go out and help people. So does that change what they are?
There is some scientific basis to that in this universe, because if we look back to Michonne's initial story arc, when she meets the governor and Milton looks at the walkers that she had, when he assesses them, he says, interesting, she cut off their arms and she removed their lower jaws and teeth.
And they become docile.
Docile. So they do almost become not themselves once losing that, is what we're like led to believe.
But he said they lose their feeding drive or something like that.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
So I guess technically, yes, they could be used for good eventually.
But if you want to use the spiritual component, there is a group in the Bible, and it's a very amorphous, non-ethnic group of people in the Bible that you're told to destroy. The whole thing is about hate and destruction. I forget what they're called. We say this a lot in Purim and also in some Torah portions, and they're called, I can't remember their name. I'll put it in the blog or something like that, but they are inherently this way. It's the same, and it's the same thing for the walkers. The walkers are inherently, they're built, they're made, their whole existence, their raison d'etre is to consume by any means necessary to get to that food. And that food is humans and maybe other living beings. But to use it as something else, it's kind of like anything, right? We think that we have such supremacy on Earth. We think that we can tame the beast, but eventually one false move in that thing that you were trying to use it for ends up being your demise. One case in point, the Croat was using it for fuel, and the whole place exploded just to get at one guy. And who cares who died along the way? And the fuel is going to end up being their demise because another group wants that fuel, and it's all based on the fact that we use this pit of walkers, this utility that we've discovered. It's just an interesting thought experiment that you can run through and realize, all roads lead back to these things are dangerous and not just a prop, and they're inherently dangerous, and you shouldn't mess with them. You shouldn't mess with them. Let's be orthodox about this.
I love that they went back to Isabelle's apartment and she took a picture of Lily to give to Laurent, just like Carl took the picture of Lori to give to Judith.
I did love that. I really quick want to talk about the walkers that were handcuffed together.
Oh, yeah. Right. Going back to Sylvie.
What was up with that?
See, I was thinking that too.
It really bothered me. It reminded me of the chains of the experiment.
Expand.
Well, we see the walker chained up.
Oh,
that's what it reminded me of.
Episode.
Yeah, because they zoom in on the chains, which I thought was weird. And they also zoomed in on the chain, those two people together. So clearly we were meant to see it. But I wasn't sure if it was just like this is just like a weird thing we're showing you.
Well, I thought, it was either one of the conductor's escaped attempts to put them in the symphony, like somehow they got away or something.
Okay, maybe.
Or it was just another instance, like Maggie finding the tied up walker in the trunk, or Maggie telling the story about the no arm, no leg, no eye baby factories.
Zombie baby.
It's just another example of the horrible shit people do to each other when they can. There's nothing to stop them. So just a little snapshot. This is the kind of horrible shit people do to each other. I don't know if it was meant to be anything in particular.
Right. I mean, because at first I was looking at that scene, I was thinking, is that why she's hesitating? And then this conversation makes me think otherwise. That, she's just not killing the dead because, what if the curse lifts? That's what I end up thinking. You're right. I don't think it's anything of any significance.
Okay.
Although, wouldn't that be cool if we got a story? These two were trying to run away. One of them dies. The other one dies from starvation.
Watch it be a Tales episode. Just kidding. They're never going to put that out again.
Yeah, wouldn't that be great, though? There's a story there. There could be a story there.
I think it was just ambiance.
Because they look like shackles. They look like old shackles, too, by the way, didn't they? That's the thing that gets you like, okay, it would be fine if there were police handcuffs, but these are like Revolutionary War shackles. They were ready for the guillotine. It's what made me think of the experiments,
because I was like,
guillotine.
I mean, they're using old muskets and shit. Apparently, you can just pick up old shackles anywhere in Paris.
Maybe.
Which is to say, okay, the most we can get out of this is that this was definitely post-apocalypse.
Quinn had all the art and antiques and all that stuff down in his little basement. So who's to say somebody didn't pluck up some antique chains and slap them on somebody? One of the terrible things people do to each other.
Even in the town of Angers, anger. Oh, the apartment scene, interestingly enough, the book that Daryl plucks the photo strip of Isabelle and Quinn is Arthur Rimbaud's Poésie Complète, which is complete poems. So Rimbaud's complete poems. I thought it was kind of interesting because the actress's name is Clémence Poésie as well. Posésie, oftenly referred to. Page 23 is just a note to the editor. I actually looked at the actual page.
That's funny.
Nothing of any importance.
I loved that he didn't actually open the book to know what page she was on.
Right? That's
he
what
just
I thought.
said
Like,
that number.
He just pulled the strip out. He didn't even look and see where it was.
So that was kind of funny to me.
The book wasn't entirely in the frame anyway for some of it too.
Well, no,
so
like when I rewatched it, he's holding the book. He just pulls it out and then puts it down and says, "You were on page 23." And so I was like, he didn't open that book.
He's a savant like Rain Man. That's why he doesn't talk. We figured it out.
He's picking up Laurent's powers. That's what it is. He's a miracle.
He just counted the pages by looking at them, just like Dustin Hoffman counted the toothpicks.
I felt like it was, I don't care what page you were on, and you're not going to freaking remember anyway. So 23. Sounds good.
Yeah, he could have just picked a random number. Sure, why not?
23 and me.
She was never going to finish reading that book of poems anyway.
That's the thing. It's like, well, who cares anymore anyway? So it was more just like, I stumbled upon this intimate memory of yours. You were on page 23. I was just looking at the book. I wasn't like investigating these photos.
He was like, so you like dudes with long hair, huh?
No, I don't want it. I don't want it.
Although, let's keep going with this for 1 second because
they're acting like teenagers. It's so gross.
I was getting some Han and Leia vibes going on
It's
up
just
there.
like it's very much like this whole, both of them are so easily offended by what the other person is saying. So it reminds me so much of like a teenage relationship where like you're just so desperate for the drama. Like the drama is what makes your relationship worthwhile. The more angry I am, like the better it is to like forgive you later. Like it's just weird. The whole thing in the bed with the last episode where she's like, "Oh, you're still going?" Yes, he doesn't know you, and he literally just showed up in France. Like, yeah, he still like misses his family. Oh no, oh, he met you, and you're the French love of his life, and he's just gonna leave everything behind. Like, it's so stupid. And then this was one of those instances where I'm like, why are you jealous? Like, one, this happened 12 years ago. You don't even know. This guy could be dead. Like, what do you care?
Wait, you're saying Daryl is jealous or
It
what? What do you
seemed
mean?
like it. I was like,
Yeah,
ew,
it did.
gross.
See, that's what I was trying to push you guys to say.
I didn't like
Because
it.
he's being very considerate of her feelings or something
I
with
don't-
regards
it
to
was
the page
gross.
number. But you could look at it a different
I
way because
mean, he
as you were
does dig the
talking,
blondes.
as you were talking about the drama, oh man, as you were talking about the drama aspect, well, doesn't that sound a little bit less like I'm jealous? No, doesn't it sound a little bit more like brothers and sisters squabbling in the end?
Yeah, I
What,
mean,
are
I
you
could
saying she's the new Carol?
Less
less Carol, more
Carol's like there was always a bit of a firewall between Carol and Daryl, even though there's
She's
love,
like the Carol.
obviously.
She's like the opposite Carol.
See, to me,
Right.
Carol and Daryl were always better off as friends. Have you ever had a friend that you've had like a really big crush on for a little while and then it like subsides but you're like still friends, but you've like seen too much now so you can never go back to that point?
Something
That's
I've
how
said
I
a lot.
feel
Yep.
like they are.
Yeah.
Where it's like
Maybe
you
there
can't
was
ever
something
go
there
back.
at first, but yeah,
It's like,
too
no,
much
you're
time
too
has gone
gross
by.
to me now for some
Yeah,
reason.
I've seen your
Yeah.
feet. That whole
Yeah,
anyway.
But Takira is saying,
let's get the romance done first, and then I'll see your feet, and I'll be like, okay, well, we're stuck with each other.
Takira says, I think he's just annoyed. He's sick of her lies.
I think,
Which that's fair because Daryl, we know your backstory. It hasn't always been sunshine, and you were not a great person, self-admittedly, before the fall.
didn't do a lot of thinking.
Why are you like throwing mad shade at her for having drugs in that box? He was like, She's like, I wasn't always a nun. I see that.
She's like, I wasn't always a nun.
And he's like, it's such a bitchy thing to say. He's like, I see that. Like, it's so bitchy. Like, just why? You literally had a bag of pills and blue meth like not that long ago, bro.
I'm just taking this all in because I feel like when he sees this, I think it's less about her than it is about him. Because she said something to the effect of, I wasn't always a nun in the first episode. She saw the scars. She said something to the effect of, I wasn't always a nun, or
yeah, but being told you weren't always a nun and seeing the proof of it.
Well,
right
nobody comes out of the womb like a nun. Like any nun can say that.
Laurent. Anyway, so
they don't come out and they're
kidding.
like, oh, she came out with a mini habit on. She's born a nun.
Well, Jesus. Okay. So anyway, you didn't teleport out of Mary's womb. Anyway, so going back to that look, though, I had written down that I think what Isabelle says about Daryl might be true is that he's always thinking, and that there must be a reason. He's been thinking all this time. There must be a reason why she doesn't want to go to Paris. And maybe, yes, it has a lot to do with the frustrations about him just saying it. Just come out and say it, Isabelle. Say it. What is it? And respecting the fact that he doesn't want to push her to say it. It's like, or doesn't care enough until he sees the pills. And he's thinking, in my pursuit of the radio, let's say, or whatever. Because this is just after he visited Falou and insisted again and again and again 3 times for a radio throughout this episode so far.
What do you mean?
He sees the pills.
He gives him an answer. Paris is crying.
Paris is crying. You hear that? Another crazy person. Paris is crying.
He just wants a radio, bruh.
I bet Daryl wishes he'd paid more attention to Eugene's radio setup now.
He's like, oh man. Well, in the next scene, he has like a beautiful mind face, but he doesn't know what he's doing. Anyway, so going back to this look, I think he's thinking to himself finally, wait, am I pushing her into a situation that she didn't want to confront? That's what I'm thinking. he's thinking in that moment. Less of that whole bitchy judgmental thing
Okay.
and more of a, I'm starting to understand without her telling me I wish she would.
Well, that makes
why
sense.
she didn't want to come back.
Because he gets so, when they're at the club and Quinn confronts her and she's like, I can
Having
handle
seen
it.
the photo of Quinn,
Yeah, I
by
can
the
handle
way.
it. And he's like, no, let's just go. Like nothing, no boat's worth this. Like nothing is
Not
worth
it. No.
Yeah.
And that dovetails, I just want to drop this one thing, that dovetails very nicely with what he knows about Carol. And that maybe all the things we said in the last episode about Quinn are true. And that he's a pimp and she lived the life and in the process got her sister pregnant. But
literally all of those things are true.
Wait, there is an alternative explanation. And that's, well, maybe this was her boyfriend. Maybe she slit her wrist to escape that boyfriend. He fished her out of the water, felt enslaved to him almost. Throughout this time, her sister was having sex with him. And maybe this was an abusive boyfriend situation. Not only abusive, but literally, I'm controlling your life now because you step out of line. Those are the terms. That's what it takes to survive.
I could see that. He's gross.
It's taking all the evidence, not just the drugs and scamming and marks and stuff like that. It's taking in the slit wrist as well. Because he said specifically, I fished you out of that bathtub.
Yeah.
Why would this happen in their relationship? It's something to think about. And in seeing that, and maybe that's, for all Daryl knows, that's what this is. This is a situation where he's saying these things, which reminds him of Carol and Ed, that whole situation, the situation that he was first frustrated with. But then over time, of course, I'm sure he sees the residue of that and why Carol is the way she is. In seeing that, she realized this is this situation. I need to get her out of this. And this is kind of my fault a little bit, which is why he wants the jet after they come back. He's like, you know what? I pushed you into a situation and now I'm doing the classic Daryl thing of pulling away. I got to pull away so I don't put you in danger anymore.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I could see it playing out that way. I'm not saying that. I mean, it's just time will tell. Like time will tell only, but
yeah. But like, hey, are you not loving the breadcrumbs and connecting these dots? It's like so satisfying in a sense. Even if it's wrong, it's all starting to make sense a little bit more with every episode.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is like a mystery in a way, where you're trying to piece together like what exactly is the plan here with this. But I think so much of that has to do with the fact that everyone is like, they're going to get together. And I'm like, why are y'all all so thirsty all the time for Daryl to be banging somebody? It's like, calm down.
It's the same reason why we want to go to the last episode, Mork and Mindy. That's what people want.
I get it. People ship
it's such a
people.
Basic
it's
function.
such a thing. Like you ship
it's
people.
It's such a basic B thing.
Yeah,
right?
It's fine. But
and we all have it in us too. We just don't always acknowledge it or adhere to it.
I just don't really do it with this genre for some reason as much.
That's why I'm so ambivalent about it. If it happens, I could be on board.
Yeah.
I don't mind.
I'm not opposed to it, but it needs to happen naturally. Like I don't want it to be like, I don't know. And
forced.
Well,
no, like I don't want the writing to be forced.
To ship someone that one of them's going to get ripped to pieces and turned into a zombie.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
on that note, I actually, in my first watch, I thought, wow, this could be the moment Isabelle bites it too. And I say this for two reasons. One, because of the situation, because everything started to happen really, really fast after they came back from the club. Secondly, what you don't see in the title sequence as Laurent and Daryl are looking at Mont Saint-Michel, it's just Laurent and Daryl. So I thought maybe at some point everybody kind of falls away and it's just those two. And now he's responsible. Which is ironic. He's the one who feels responsible for this kid.
It's not even his mission. Like he doesn't even believe the mission that he's on, but he would want to keep him safe.
Right. And some of the things that we said in the last episode are coming to fruition here. She says to him, your absence has to be explained now. It was one thing when you pushed for the radio and didn't know what you were asking for from me, which is my fault, Isabelle. She doesn't really say this. She doubles down. She says, you don't really believe he's the Messiah. She should have said, my bad. I should have been more honest about why I didn't want to go to Paris. That's what she should have said. But instead, she went the neurotic route and said, you just don't believe he's the Messiah. You don't believe he's the one. But she does emphasize the fact that your absence is something that's going to be questioned. You're responsible because you are involved now. You can't uninvolve yourself like that just because you think you're leaving is going to keep us safe. That has to be explained, which is why Laurent says, I hate both of you. You for leaving after getting involved with me and trying to not just save us or help us, for being involved, for caring, and you for lying all this time, Isabelle. So It's really fascinating to see this from Laurent. But Laurent, he's a regular kid. He's not just some holy dude.
Yeah.
But he is pretty smart.
He's emotionally intelligent, incredibly.
Too.
Just to see him interact with that woman, Sonia.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, that had me tearing up.
Really?
It
I teared up a little right there. I'm not gonna
it was
lie.
impactful because like he's surrounded by all of these people
That's
who are
cool.
giving him gifts. It was very religious in nature, very much so. But they're all giving their gifts like it's the wise men coming to visit Jesus. And then he's like,
12 years too late, but still.
And he just, well, not 12
10.
years. Yeah,
10,
yeah, exactly.
10. Or 15, and it is 12, and it was just, anyway, sorry, we're doing math now.
He takes them and he doesn't even really look at what he's receiving. He just says, thank you.
It felt a little weird that it was natural for him to just readily accept these gifts. I don't know if that's a me thing. I wouldn't accept things right away.
Well,
for
it's
myself.
the polite thing to do.
It's definitely a me thing.
It's the polite thing to do.
Right. Refusing would have been rude.
Yeah. So it manners wise, I mean, and they made that very obvious. He was taught the proper etiquette would be to accept the gift. And so he does and says, thank you, and then moves on. So like, instead of being like, oh, you shouldn't have, that's a nice hospitality thing, but that's not proper etiquette.
It made me think of Harry Potter, the kid that didn't know he was special, showing up and all these people just being all over him.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was the kind of vibe that I got from it. Yes, he's told he's a little bit special, but he doesn't really understand until he comes into contact with people that he hasn't met who think he's that special. Of course, all the nuns that he's been with all these years think he's special and love him, but now he's getting that from other people, and maybe it's helping him
he's
understand
never met,
a little bit.
Who have been telling to tell him, we've been waiting for you. Like, you have no idea how long we've been waiting for you.
You were about to say something about Sonia.
It showed, like, at minimum, right? Because there's been some moments where, like, what exactly is Laurent's deal? But at minimum, he's got the emotional intelligence aspect down because he spans the area, sees this woman is by herself, can tell by the expression on her face that she's unhappy, and rolls with that. Did either of you ever watch Lie to Me, the TV show?
He also said that in the first episode that he felt things about people in his stomach, remember? So when he saw that woman, he just felt automatically that something was wrong. He's got some empath powers.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that empathy is a thing, and I believe that you can have like the gift of empathy to truly feel what other people are feeling.
Pick up on those cues, at least.
But if you watch the show Lie to Me, long since canceled, but so good. In it, the concept of like having been through trauma causes you to develop the ability to see people's emotions more clearly. I think sometimes is where we get this concept of like the power of empathy. I'm not talking like regular empathy, but I mean like supernatural empathy, the power of an empath. So
I figured that's where you're going.
A lot of that is from the exposure to trauma and like having to learn as a young child how to react to things. So in one of the first episodes of Lie to Me, there's a main character that's introduced, and she is a girl who works for TSA at an airport. She's able to pull out someone out of line. She was able to read a micro expression, because that's what all of that show is about, is like micro expressions and like the things that people try to hide on their face.
Stuff that mentalists pick up on.
She's
too.
able to read it and pulls him out of line because like he's a threat and he has like a weapon on him. Well, she gets tapped by this agency, which is like where the Lie to Me thing story goes. But anyway, you come to find out that her father was a severe alcoholic. And like, that's why she developed that skill to be able to read anger and people's emotions really early in her years, because she had to know whether or not he was going to hurt her. And so that's kind of what this reminded me of. Now, granted, he hasn't been exposed to that kind of trauma because he hasn't even really been in the world, but just being able to hone in on people's micro expressions and like the smallest things to be able to see what they're feeling.
And maybe there's a half spiritual component, maybe even half biological component.
Yeah, and who knows? I mean, I'm not trying to debunk it. It's just that I don't know where this is going to go, so I'm trying to see like all sides of it.
No, I'm just dovetailing on what you're saying, though. It's interesting because Isabelle says it was all horrible, and we saw what it took to birth Laurent. So maybe there's a weird inborn trauma that he's not aware of that allows him to do this. I'm not a biologist or an evolutionary biologist. I don't know how this works, but maybe there's something even narratively compelling about the concept of a child born out of severe distress having this ability, let's say, whether you believe it or not.
The part of me that, is hopeful constantly and has bigger beliefs, like wants to believe that there's the potential for this in this storyline. But at the same time, like, I didn't want the cure. I certainly don't want it now. I already rooted for one kid's death. Like, please don't make me root for another. Like, I don't. I mean,
this kid seems so cool.
I don't want it.
And so did Finch, but still.
Finch seemed cooler, honestly. Can we talk about Jim Morrison?
Yeah, I wanted to go backwards anyway.
It seems like that's what we're doing. We're all over the place anyway.
This is
We're all over this.
My only friend.
That's not the song. It's the earworm. People are strange.
People are strange.
Stop it.
When you're a stranger.
Stop it. No, you're just.
What
you're
were we just talking about? The Lost Boys.
I'm editing this out because it'll be in their heads. The audience will be like, "Bitch, why did you put that in my head?" See? Never mind. I'm not editing it.
Anyway. One, I almost felt like this was written in because like Norman Reedus was like, I want to go check out Jim Morrison's grave.
No way.
No way. I'm kidding. I have no.
Jim Morrison's grave. We have to put this in the show.
But like, they're all talking about these famous writers and philosophers.
He's like, hey, Jim Morrison.
Poets. And
one of which I definitely do want to talk about.
I'm just kidding, because Norman Reedus predominantly listens to punk, so I don't know if he's into the Doors or not. But Jim Morrison's grave is in Gay Paris, and I wanted to see
Père Lachaise. It's the Père Lachaise Cemetery.
Yes, I've read a lot about Jim Morrison over the years. I was telling Dave this before we started recording, but I got weirdly into like a biography phase in high school, and resulted in me reading many a biography about musicians. Anyway, I read a lot about Jim Morrison. I couldn't remember, though, why he was buried in Paris. So when they ask him and he's like, oh, he must have died here, I was like, yeah, why is he there? I knew he was there because I remember I've seen the pictures of the grave. So I went and looked it up, and he went to Paris to get clean again. Now, Jim Morrison had a really rough time of it in terms of addiction. He struggled with both alcohol and drugs, substance abuse, very much so, including hair.
And apparently halitosis from what I read, including heroin. He wanted to get clean, so he went to Paris. He felt this was going to be the time that worked. There's a story that his friends have told that he visited this cemetery a couple days before he passed. And he walked around and he said, it was beautiful, and this is where I would like to be buried amongst all of these masters. He did then, quote unquote, mysteriously die shortly thereafter. I don't know how mysterious it actually was, but did end up being buried there. Now, of course, lots of people have traveled to this cemetery to see his grave. Obviously, there's many other graves there, but I love that the little shrine was there. Those roses were plastic.
Plastic? Okay, I was like, they were new.
I thought initially like, oh, somebody's been visiting this grave. But then I thought to myself, oh, they're probably plastic.
That makes more sense.
Why wouldn't they be? Because Falou is not a young man. There are obviously people still alive who are of that age in Paris. I'm sure there are rose bushes growing. Versailles had rose gardens. I'm sure there are rose bushes growing.
It's a bit of a drive, though.
Pluck some roses and use them as
I know what you mean, though. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
It is literally steps away that they run into Falou and his people, because the camera pans over and there's two dead bodies wrapped up in plastic and like tarps and cloth or whatever. And then that's where Falou is. And he's like, stop right there. That was my only thought, was maybe they had placed the roses. And then I was like, well, maybe there's other communities. And there was all this talk about there being like these communities of artists, and we've seen it in World Beyond, that maybe there would be
in Perimeter Colony, specifically.
Maybe there would be people to put roses on his grave. It did pan over the phrase that's on his tombstone. It's Greek. I will not say it because I will absolutely butcher the pronunciation. But this is what's on his headstone. The one who fights his own demons.
An epitaph.
Yes. I mean, it's very, very, very touching for him, because obviously that's what he was there doing, was battling his own demons, trying to get clean.
And throughout his musical career, too. Wasn't it Riders on the Storm about a car accident, I think it was, or something?
Yes, yeah.
A tragic car accident.
It actually had a lot to do with his drug addiction, from what I remember, was kind of the catalyst for it.
And just fighting against that trauma, let's say, and things to do with Native Americans. Yeah. It's a whole thing. But yeah.
Now, during this time, there's a French version of People Are Strange playing in the background. And I just thought, oh, yeah, obviously this song.
Because
it's for Daryl. It's
Daryl.
Daryl.
I mean,
Daryl.
people are strange when you're a stranger. Faces look ugly when you're alone.
Mm-hmm.
Women seem wicked when you're unwanted. Streets are uneven when you're down. That sounds like Daryl to me.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Or it sounds like anyone. Because we were talking about the U.S. cultures in the U.S. versus cultures abroad, let's say, from outside. We don't welcome people quite as much as people outside the country do. And I can see that being an interesting thing to explore when it comes to this song. That maybe everybody in their own way kind of looks ugly until you get to know them.
Well, yeah, but that's not really the point of this.
No, of course not.
It's that he's alien. He's an alien. That's what the whole point of this is. This is the one thing he's able to recognize, and it's someone who wrote a song about what it's like to be lonely and alone in a place that you don't recognize.
Not these authors and poets and that they were rattling off
that's
before.
The thing. That's the point. That's the thing. Like, that would be recorded in history books. So this is like actively, you're just not focused on that aspect of it. Because who's Jim Morrison to you? Like, who cares? But to an American who grew up during the time period in which Daryl grew up, 70s with Mork and Mindy, this was a part of his life. He grew up around this. He grew up with this music. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I grew up with this music.
To your point, this is the one unstrange thing, and he's latching onto that. No, but it's Jim Morrison. He's a rock star. But it's alien to everybody else. Yeah. It's strange to everybody else. And like we all said, right? Fish out of water story. This is going to be running throughout the entire series. It has to. It's strange to us that he even ended up there to begin with. So we have to run with that and not be too critical when cultures clash or concepts clash, existentialism versus cooperation, etc., or burdens from God, things like that. We have to accept that there's going to be some confrontation. I like the story that was it La Mort de Boucheron, Death in the Lumberjack, that Laurent tells Daryl is particularly telling because we all do this thing where like, kill me now, FML, this idea of FML, take me now. We do this, but of course we don't mean it. So when death finally comes, you're like, no, like, I was just kidding. It's
just a saying.
I was just blowing off some steam. Yeah, God. It's an Aesop's fable that was adapted by Jean de La Fontaine. Anyway, so the whole point being that, and I write this later on in the episode, but isn't Isabelle the lumberjack? She's ready to take on that burden that she took on for whatever reason. And now I missed the fact that while in the second episode where Isabelle is with Lily and they're getting ready to have the child, I skipped right over the one part where I heard Lily saying to Isabelle, raise Laurent, basically. But just before that, she says, when our parents died, you stepped up. You took care of me. I thought I had this thought that came out of nowhere, but she says it literally. And when she was ready to take on the burden of doing what she felt she needed to do to save Daryl, I mean, of course, she's mad at him because he's trying to do the same with her. And at the same time, later on, tries to leave. Like, I don't need a hero, she says, right? Just after that part. But isn't she trying to do the same thing? Aren't you trying to be the hero, accepting this burden? Because I'm used to it. I took on this burden before, being with him or whatever the relationship was, nebulous as it was. So all this to say, isn't Isabelle the lumberjack complaining about his burdens, but at the same time asking for death?
Didn't see it that way. But yeah, now that you say that, that does make more sense. Because obviously we're meant to think it's representative of Daryl. Because he says there's a woodsman, Daryl.
Right. Dirty, filthy.
Who, who just like can't catch a break. Daryl. And he's just like, I just want to be done.
But the defining quality of the lumberjack is always complaining. This is an elderly lumberjack too, mind you. He's lived all this life in toil, sometimes not had food on the table, sometimes enough funds to pay for taxes and wars and all this stuff. He mentioned this in the poem, actually. And he's like, well, what pleasures have I taken in life? And that's what got me to think, this isn't about Daryl. What pleasures have I taken in life? She's a nun. Mm-hmm. She's had to raise a kid. She's had to devote her life to God.
I would argue she had a little too much pleasure in her 20s.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. She had quite a bit of pleasure, I think.
I would argue.
Was it? But that's the thing. Was it pleasure?
Well, no, she was miserable.
Even the temporary relief.
Well, it's self-medication.
With it comes consequences. Right, exactly. It wasn't to enjoy the night. It was a job. It was to get by. What little reliefs that we got. So that's what made me think, okay, she is the lumberjack. She is the one who at some point complains that she wants in her head, probably because she doesn't tell anybody anything. I just want a little bit of a relief from these responsibilities, a little relief from those burdens. But as soon as the opportunity comes up again, she puts them on again for some reason. Lily, Laurent, God, Daryl.
Because it's
too.
all she has left.
It's what she's programmed to do. And I think maybe even Daryl is seeing the pattern, and it all came from this guy, Quinn. That's my life. My life is to suffer burdens. The biggest burden, and being manipulated and controlled, let's say. So wouldn't it make sense, in a sense, when Daryl says, when people join a cause called Pouvoir des Vivants, he finally points out the logo and he says, that's that group. What are they about? Oh, they came up during the fall. They wanted to, she boils it down to control, to establish order, let's say. And he retorts saying, kind of like you joining up with God or something like that.
Well, she says people gravitate towards order.
Right.
And he says, or God.
Yeah.
Which admittedly, I was like, slow up.
Yeah, she said,
up,
or God.
Slow up.
But he's not wrong. Many people do glom onto religion to get a sense of order in their lives, or a sense of like a path that they can walk.
Well, yeah, because faith offers hope,
towards.
Dave. That's what,
right.
And that's the theme of
and
this.
Salvation, apparently. But in that very essence of hope and salvation, let's say, that's a leap of faith, that if I follow this path, if I walk this path, I'll be rewarded. But you have to believe in the reward to walk this path, because it's not, it's not saying it's a hard path.
I want to be clear about that, because it's not the path that gets you there. Well, I mean, that is kind of Catholicism's root, like good works equals salvation, ultimately.
Right.
But that's not what I would say it is. Salvation, you didn't even earn. I don't do anything for it. I don't have to do anything. It's just given to me freely.
Oh, interesting. Christianity, an interesting religion, doesn't it?
Yeah. We cannot earn our salvation by being good people or doing anything. I'm giving it freely. It's been given to me. It's been
exchange
given
for faith.
Everyone. You believe or you don't. That's the belief.
Riddle me this, Bridget. You, as a Protestant offshoot, let's say, you don't believe in original sin.
I do believe in original sin. Yes.
Oh, you do? Okay,
yeah.
Okay. Because I thought that was born out of, in at least Catholicism, is that
they just become intertwined. They just become intertwined. Like, I can understand how they reached that conclusion. I get it.
They just use different methods to dealing with it, right? So Catholicism has confession and and all these, et cetera, et cetera.
We can have confession and absolution as well, but it's just a man doesn't give it to me, if that makes sense. And I know that that's not how it is in Catholicism either. It's just like, it becomes more about like the ritual of it, the ritual of like doing the rosary, the ritual of going to confession. Like it becomes more of
prescription.
That. Yeah. And like when you go and you confess, it's not like your sins are forgiven because Jesus died and like everything's taken care of. Your sins are forgiven, Jesus died and is taken care of, but also do this. Right. Say your Hail Marys.
Repetition. Yeah. Something I said in the last episode.
Yeah. And again, like there's no shade. I grew up Protestant, so I just have a different view.
Well, and fundamentally, right, Protestantism was born out of the idea of the individual's relationship with God rather than the collective. The kernel of where that was born is that man's personal relationship with God rather than through the church.
Yes, but it's not
from their point of view.
It's not about community versus the individual. It's about understanding as a person versus being told. Because what happened was, the reason that Martin Luther left the Catholic Church is because Catholics were going to mass and they were being read scripture in Latin and they didn't speak the language. So they were being told something and they didn't know what they were being told.
Understand it.
Yeah.
Right,
and so, and this
Many
is during
was
during like the Dark Ages.
Also, most people were illiterate.
Yes.
So they couldn't
read it anyway. And there was no publishing. We didn't have the Gutenberg press yet.
And soon thereafter there was, which is attributed to their success. Which is how all of this
came about to then result in the Protestant movement, which then did take off after that.
So I knew all along Codon was Stéphane's last name.
Yes.
And Michel was his brother. So when he announces himself to Genet in this episode, it's very interesting when he walks and he does see the experiment first, the first part of the experiment where they're poking it with sticks and it's going, oh, don't hit me with that stick, the walker in the experiment. And then he comes out and he sees the result. One of the things that I thought of overall was that perhaps during this moment, he's thinking there's something bigger going on here, and maybe it has something to do with why Daryl left that boat. And I think maybe just like Rachel in some of the earlier episodes, at some point, Codon might shift his gears and not seek vengeance from Daryl for too much longer because he's going to see the bigger threat. He expresses it in this episode that he was in Marseille. Some dude said, join us and we'll upend this world the right way.
We'll give you a free tattoo.
We'll fix the world. Right. And we'll give you a free face tattoo, which is not a good deal, but he took it anyway.
The worst part is that it's like a tribal tattoo. It's so weird.
But you'll notice it does kind of look like the logo of Pouvoir des Vivants. So it's interesting. People sometimes codify their belief in ink. And, we got the Maori in New Zealand.
Somebody was a fan of George Clooney in From Dusk Till Dawn.
Somebody in the makeup department was definitely a fan of George Clooney. From Dusk Till Dawn.
That's so funny that you say that because, again, this is about the webisodes. The first webisode was written by John Esposito. He was a producer on From Dusk Till Dawn, and then he worked with Nicotero.
Dang, he probably still is.
That's it.
Face tattoo. Anyway, going back to Genet and Caudron, I do want to point out that she does have a fishbowl of lighters, I think it was. Matches, lighters, and she even has a flashlight next to her. So I thought the imagery of flames, the ability to start a flame, and the torch being the light, the last light of the world. Who said that? Kubrick. Anyway.
Interesting. Okay, that's fair. Now that you say that with the lighters, it reminds me of the woman in the last episode of Dead City.
The president?
Yeah.
New Babylon?
Yeah.
Something to that effect.
The woman in New Babylon. Didn't she have a lighter?
Smokey. We called her Smokey.
Yeah. And the band.
This is why we're thinking.
Okay. Yeah. It's all coming back now.
Well, she had the cigar and the light. She did the same thing. Yeah. Genet rolls up a cigar in this episode, and Smokey has these premium rolled Cubans that was made by ethanol and the processing of whatever, getting the temperature just right.
It made me think of that just now when you said that. But
is there anything more annoying, by the way, than people who are cigar aficionados? We get it. You have a humidor. Okay. Sorry.
It's like on the same level as people who talk about the taste of hops in their beer to me. Which I'm now realizing is a slight towards you and your friend. I apologize.
Yeah, my friend Chris from On Tap, whose whole thing is about talking about beers from around the world.
I'm sorry, Chris.
I'll make sure to send him this clip. He'll take it in jest.
You know a little bit about my background. I grew up with not a lot of money.
Party Bridget? Oh, okay,
not a lot of money. Party Bridget. And so I was a Peebs girl all the way because it was $15 for
Pabst Blue Ribbon
for a case. So that's what I drink. And
not the Natty Light?
No, I have some culture, man. I'm just kidding. I was a hipster. Anyway, so
that's news to me.
I'm not going to lie to you. I drank PBR Tall Boys in a bar that someone once wrote on what was that app called? Foursquare, where you could leave those one sentence reviews. Someone once left a review.
Location-based app. Yeah.
On the bar that was my favorite bar, it said, "This Cracker Barrel serves alcohol." So that just kind of gives you the vibe that I had. Anyway.
You Southern hipster going on in a weird way.
I want to know where she got the tobacco.
Oh, well, we are the last light. We have to have smokes. Wait, is it tobacco though?
Well, that's what I was wondering. Is it tobacco? But either way, tobacco wasn't cultivated in Europe. It was cultivated in the U.S.
Oh,
if they could cultivate it in Europe, they would have.
Maybe that's one of the things they're shipping over on that boat.
Right. Is there a plantation where that's where they decided to go was with repopulating the earth was growing tobacco?
Well, what better to dull the populace?
Maybe it's on the coffee plantation.
Oh, no.
Maybe that's the hook. Maybe Caudron, it didn't quite travel down the pipeline to Marseille. So he would get the weed too. He was just like, hey, we're going to fix the world and give you a face tattoo. Oh, the people up there get weed? What a raw deal.
He's saying, I promised my parents I would take care of my brother. Well, maybe you should have taught him not to be a rapist, and then he wouldn't have been killed.
Yikes.
Sorry, dude.
Also, the other thing is, his brother was not a baby. He was a full-grown man who got himself into trouble, dude.
But think about it. The last words his parents said probably before the fall, and he's pretty young. Michel looked pretty young.
Oh, that's true.
Even if he was 25, it made him 13. Even 30. Let's go as far as 30. He would be 18. So that sticks with you.
Are we supposed to correlate, what's his name, Stefan, with Isabelle? Because she also lost a sister that she was tasked with caring for.
Oh,
Was that something that they're going to find?
Interesting.
And that we have to find a purpose to move on.
Well, and now they finally crossed paths. I
Is
mean, a
that
little
going to be a
bit.
connection point for them?
They're all going to gun for Quinn
They
by the
both
end
lost.
of it.
Well, I wonder, because this is a parallel through all three of their stories, right? Tattoo Face, Isabelle, and Daryl.
Tattoo Face.
The last person that you have is who you're tasked with taking care. Daryl was never tasked with taking care of Merle, but that was his blood.
You're missing a very important piece. As much as I want it to be Merle, it's not Merle. What sent him on this journey to begin with? I'm just gonna let's end recording. No, it's Rick. Finding Rick or finding them.
Yeah, you're right.
Rick and Michonne, let's say. No, but your point still stands.
I get what you're saying. But I don't like when we leave out the fact that like he did have a brother. And yes, that was a complicated relationship. But like we all have complicated relationships with family. I mean, maybe not all of us. Some of us, I guess, have normal upbringing. So like, congratulations. Good for you. But
how great
to those of us
who
did not, no matter what happens with your family, even if you don't talk to them anymore, you still love them to some degree.
Yeah, of course. And
I mean, you
always.
hold love for them, however that may look.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that relationship to this story is not yet over. The reason why I say that is let's jump around a bit. Why not? That's what we do. When Caudron tries to get Daryl on the rooftops by the end of this episode, you notice that Daryl has the upper hand at one point, then his people open fire. But what I saw in that moment is something very interesting. It's this weird looking at the other side of a story. And of course, we should mention this because we haven't yet. There's a new game that is in development. The what if story. What if The Walking Dead? What if this character lives? Yeah. So I saw that in this moment. I saw, well, what if Daryl was the one to die and Merle had lived? They're living each other's lives in a weird way. Daryl's older brother was murdered by the governor, which, okay, we talked about in the first episode, I think it was. And then in this episode, Caudron's little brother, Daryl, but it's Michelle, got murdered, got killed. What would have happened if Merle had lived instead of Daryl? They're of the same story, but they're just each other's brothers, let's say. And in that respect, I think there's another basis of them being able to see the other side of their stories and maybe see that in each other. Aside from the fact that, yeah, maybe this group is bullshit. Maybe there's something wrong here. Maybe they're making things worse. And then maybe it's because of them that Michelle got killed. Not really Daryl. Daryl was just there. Wrong place, wrong time. And who knows, Maribel might actually, she's still around. She might say something.
Yeah, I'm wondering if she'll come back into play.
She has to. She went with them. Her fate isn't determined yet.
Well, plus...
we said that about Quinn.
We might see in the next episode. Stupid Face came back into play in World Beyond. That schmuck.
Stupid Face?
Yeah, you know, the grifters.
Okay, you're talking about Percy?
Percy.
No. Is it Percy? And what was his name?
I don't know who the uncle,
Tony.
I don't remember the uncle.
Tony.
Yeah, Uncle
some
Tony.
Italian.
Uncle Tony.
Delmato.
I like
Percy
Tony.
And Tony.
Percy,
Stupid
I could live
Face.
without.
That was enough to go by.
Well, you figured it out.
You know me so well.
I didn't really care for Percy, but anyway.
The only thing I want to say about the end scene is Daryl stood there for a good 5 seconds and watched that floor crack underneath him and didn't bother to
I was like, why isn't he moving?
Daryl, move. He just stood there and looked at it.
Well, I know it's kind of like when you're on ice and it cracks, like you're not supposed to like rapidly move because it can actually cause more damage.
Like fall over backwards or something, because he didn't even attempt to move. He just stood there and looked at it, watched it crack around him.
Well, I was thinking that too, the ice flow situation or the ice cracking.
Because that's what I was taught always as a child. I don't know why. Like I was taught that one, I wasn't in an icy environment. So why was I taught that?
Milwaukee, Wisconsin at the time? Or
no,
was this
I grew up here. So like, I don't know why I was taught that. I mean, I was also taught how to swim out of an undertow, and that did come in handy, but the ice thing never came up.
Isn't it that you don't? I forget.
Oh, no.
You don't swim?
No. You swim at a diagonal.
You swim parallel to the shore rather than try to swim.
So you try to swim like out.
Rather than try to swim forward.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Rather than try to swim forward to the shore, you swim parallel until you're out of it.
Okay.
No, it's not that you don't swim. Dave, never don't swim.
Just don't swim, guys. Just let the undertow take you.
Just let it take you away.
Take my advice on a podcast about the Walking Dead universe or beyond and beyond.
Well, know, we like to give a little piece of survivalist information every once in a while.
You do.
I do.
I was watching a video where they found this like little 4-year-old girl on a unicorn raft, like 2 miles out to sea. She'd been playing on the unicorn raft with her parents at the beach, and the tide caught her and carried her out. And a fishing boat found her 2 miles out to sea, sitting on the unicorn raft.
Alive, right?
Alive. Yeah, she was alive.
How long had she been out there?
I mean, a couple hours. It wasn't long, but she just floated out and nobody could find her.
Wow.
She got caught in the tide and carried out.
Amazing. I'd say you're hearing Takira, aka Connie Dixon for life. That's ko-fi.com/Connie Dixon #4LYFE. Okay, now you can talk.
I came to say hi, bye.
Oh, hi, bye.
Oh, hi. Bye.
Bye bye.
Thanks for being in the chat, by the way. I have been looking at the chat.
Yeah, I have too. I've been
figured.
reading what you've been saying. Yeah, we like end up moving past it, and then I'd be like, oh well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was more of a comment than it was a nugget.
I think the Vicodin has slowed my typing skills.
Yeah, it's fine. You can
We'll
just
do
sit and
that.
watch too.
A. N.
What's after A? Yeah.
D.
Except like X popped up, so now you got a backspace, and then you backspace too many times.
What are letters? And what are letters
It's
to begin with?
It's the computer lagging, not me, I swear.
I know we're racing towards the end, but I took the bother of writing down what Anna Valeri, Quinn's new girlfriend, obviously, because she looks at Isabelle all jealously,
Oh, yeah.
the singer, basically.
Mhm.
So what she's singing in this episode is Le Temps de l'amour, which is the time of love. And it's by Françoise Hardy. The song is about basically living life while you're young, while you're youthful and optimistic. You go on adventures, you're having the time of your life. You love hard too. And it also talks about when you get older, how even though love is ever present, the way you approach it is differently. You look at it more as a lifeline, but it's really, the song's about remembering your past fondly. Meanwhile, the past of all the people involved in the show, and maybe even for Daryl as well, it's almost as if their past is almost a curse or an anchor. The way Caudron talks about Michel, about his brother and had promising to keep him alive until he's murdered. The way Isabelle talks about her past and it being a burden that she can handle now in the present because she's been there before. And all the burdens she's had to endure since then. Even the burden that Laurent is placed under as the savior or messiah. This is a burden that has been foisted upon him because that's the way it is. When all he wants is to be a kid and to experience the adventure, joy, and love, which I don't know about you, but it seemed like Laurent, his eyes were like saucers in the club, taking in everything, and maybe even Sylvie as well.
Yes.
Because this is her time.
She was getting macked on by either Emile or Bastien.
Yes.
We don't know who
Yes.
it was.
I think it's Emile.
Okay.
Yeah.
He was like, the unattainable. I'm interested.
Paris will be Paris. Boys will
Right.
be boys.
She's just as innocent as Laurent when it comes to that because she was so little when she got left at
And
the
sheltered.
Abbey. The only music they've probably ever heard is nuns singing religious music. I'm sure they've probably never heard any kind of, especially like nightclub-esque type music, and
is
they've never
this
seen
place?
anything like that.
Yeah. Sur la pont d'Avignon, on y danse. Yeah.
They've
Whatever.
never even seen that in a movie or on TV. Like, they have no concept of that whatsoever. Like, before we've ever been in a bar as young people, we've seen bars on television. We know what to expect.
Right.
Yeah, I
They've
watched
never had that
Cheers.
experience. or I mean, shoot, Miami Vice. You know, they had bars in there. You know what I'm saying? Like they've seen we have the benefit of seeing like nightclub stuff. They've never seen anything like that. That is totally
P3 from
totally
Charmed.
new to them.
That's your bar. That's what you want
from
to draw on.
Buffy.
The Max from
From
Saved by the Bell. It's like the Max with alcohol. Typical place you'd frequent,
this
right,
Max
Bridget?
has alcohol.
Le Temps de l'amour by Françoise Hardy. Hardy. Look it up. It's pretty cool. It's a good song too. Yeah, I just wish Isabelle would be more honest. I think that was really the cause for all these issues.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Honestly. And I think she realizes that by the end, sort of too. That had she been more open about not wanting to go to Paris, well, then they would have been a lot more prepared for what they encountered too. Instead of Daryl having to piece it together on his own by seeing the drugs, the photo, the scars,
You're on
putting
page 23.
all of that together. They're on page 23. You know, just in case you wanted to go back to it, you know, I'm just being a good boyfriend.
Ew.
Yuck.
Or brother, a nice brother.
I feel like the more I see them interact, the less they like each other. They respect each other.
My mom always said growing up, there's a thin line between hate and love, Bridget. Because there was this boy at
Exactly
school
like
who used to
that?
annoy the piss out of me. And I would come home every day and I would be like, his name was Carl with a K. And I'd be like,
Ooh.
Carl, I know, horrible. And I'd be like, Carl got us all in trouble and we all got demerits today because he wouldn't shut his stupid mouth and blah, blah, blah. And she was like, always like, well, I think you're just talking about him a little too much. I think there's a thin line between hate and love, Bridget.
Methinks you doth protest
too much. Yes. And I was always like, no, I really hate him.
Skipping to the end of that story, knowing that you're involved with Travis, did she end up being right?
No, I vehemently hated Carl. Still do to this day. That's why I remember that he spelled his name with a K,
What's his
which is the worst way to
what's his
spell
last name?
Carl.
Let's put him on blast. What's his last name?
I don't know, but I don't remember that because this is elementary school.
Ouch!
This is elementary school. This is like really young Bridget. One of my elementary school teachers added me on Facebook recently. This is like weird. Anyway, she posted a video in which we're singing the song The Drinking Gourd. It's a story about the Underground Railroad. Anyway, I am making some just really classic Bridget faces in this video from when I was a child. I don't even remember learning this song. And clearly I didn't because I'm holding open the book in front of me. So like clearly I didn't bother to do the homework. and I'm just like this the whole time. Like at the camera, like I was so mad about it. But anyway, it pans over and there's Carl. And all of a sudden I was like, I still can't stand that.
Still hate. This really goes nicely to that conversation we had in Dead City about the light and the running the light, the guy getting too close, and that whole thing. You don't forget, do you?
The guy with the light.
Just the traffic light, the driving, and the guy did this thing, and yeah. So there you go. I reminded you now. Bridget doesn't forget.
I don't. It's a real problem.
Let's not do anything against Bridget.
It's a bad
ever.
thing. You shouldn't hold grudges. It's wasted energy.
It's very ungodly of you.
It is. Good thing Jesus still loves me. I got salvation, baby.
Well done.
You might forget what people say and do, but you never forget how people make you feel.
And so here's the other thing. Carl was in the AG program. So were a lot of my other friends. Academically gifted, baby. That's what it's here down in the South. The AG program. Anyway.
Gotcha. So he's either super successful or
who knows? It's a complete toss-up. The AG program kids were always a little socially inept. But anyway, so
maybe he's on the spectrum or something?
I don't know. I tested for AG and I missed it by like a point. And that haunted me like the rest of my life. That's that ridiculous. I missed it by a point.
Maybe that's why you resent Carl so much in the rear view.
But I was really good friends with another kid who was in AG. I still have fond memories of that kid.
Wait a minute. Maybe it's you. Maybe you're like, maybe you did have a secret thing for Carl.
I don't know. Guess who I married? A guy who was in
Carl?
The AG program.
All right, Scoob.
Is Travis's real name Carl? Did he change it?
Yeah. Well, Travis's middle name is Carl. So
No,
we solved that mystery. Yeah, it's Carl. It's fine. It's fine. You don't have to lie.
Up north, that program is the GNA program. So that's kind of hilarious to me.
So not GNR?
Yes. The GNR
I would love
program.
the Guns N' Roses program.
I would personally enroll.
I would take the GNR program.
What happens in that program?
Program.
What happens in that program? Exactly.
A lot of fighting.
We go
apparently.
dancing with Mr. Brownstone.
A lot of fighting.
Oh,
he used to get in a lot of fights. Axl Rose liked to pick fights.
It's both a PE and academic program. That's what is happening to the show. Anyway, I did want to touch on one thing. The backdoor plot to this series really is something that we really need to keep highlighting. Because lest we forget, because everything that's happened to every other character, burdens, broken promises, lies, truths not being told, some of this does have something to play directly with, well, no, all of this has to directly play into the overall plot, which is Daryl. Why is Daryl here to begin with? Not about how he got there, but why he ended up in this mess. What was the kernel of it? And that was trying to find Michonne and Rick. And maybe Daryl himself is starting to figure out that he's been walking the same path as Isabelle, putting a burden on himself, We saw this in the 10C episodes. Well, one of them at least, where he for years, he was putting on the burden, trying to find Rick until he said, finally, I got to walk away from this, essentially.
That's not the only burden he carries.
Has he specifically said that he's looking for Rick, or did he just say that he went looking for something?
He said he went looking for
said something.
something.
Yes. He went looking for something, and all he found was trouble.
Yes.
So there is no saying that he is out specifically looking for
We
Rick.
only make that assumption because of what he said when he left.
Well, also
But he
the look
didn't even
ahead.
say that when he left. He just said if he got wind of them while he were out there, that he would bring them home. But I didn't get from what he said that he was specifically going out there to look for Rick.
As vague as they have been about how he got there, I have the feeling that we're going to find out that he was looking for something else.
Because maybe
I'd like for that to be the case.
Rick's already home.
Or maybe Rick's already dead.
Maybe Rick sent
It's
him to
possible.
find
It's
something.
possible.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Mm.
Well, then we go back to the 12-year since the apocalypse thing, and it just bothers me. I don't know how to explain it.
I think
It's
Rick
too
makes
soon
it home
after.
before Daryl does. Like they miss each other.
That's
Mm.
possible, but I have a feeling that all of these spinoffs will ultimately lead to maybe another spinoff where all of these storylines end up converging, because it has to. Or slow your roll, Dave. Arguing with Dave. It doesn't have to, but it feels like that's where we're headed.
You just argued with
Dead
yourself.
City.
They're going to pull a Madison and Alicia, and Rick will die before Daryl gets back, and then somebody who we thought was dead is going to show up with his arm or something. I mean,
But then the story continues. That's all
Like
I'm
the
saying.
governor is back somehow.
the governor's going to show up, and he's got Rick's left leg,
And
or
he's
some
like,
shit. I mean,
and he's like, I'm not gone until I'm gone. It's like, what?
Whoa.
What?
Well, Clark was her maiden
Also,
name. and
now
her-
my name is Morris.
They've been trying to break me again.
Do you mean Maurice?
No,
Mo. It's Mo.
it's Morris. His name is Morris.
It's
He was
Morgan.
Philip, then he was Brian, then he's Morris.
Maybe he's Morgan. Mo.
To quote Laurent,
The beer balloon.
I hate both
the
of you.
beer balloon comes back, and it's carrying Rick's
I hate you
sled.
both. And- And if you like what you've heard, head over to ratethispodcast.com/Squawking Dead. 5 stars and an aubergine. All we need to know that you love us. But tell us what you liked. Tell us what you didn't like. Tell us why you're laughing if you know it's going to cause internal bleeding. But remember to tell us these details after every single episode. And if you really like what we've done to your tummy tum-tum, well, consider maybe following us on either Ko-fi or Patreon so that you can get the details of when we're recording next. So you can be in the real-time chat. It's free to join, free to follow, and free to attend these recording sessions. But if you are enjoying this as much as we are, clearly, consider tipping us on ko-fi.com/squawkingdead or join a membership tier on either patreon.com/squawkingdead or Ko-fi. For as little as $1, you'll get instant access to our Discord and the unedited episode recordings, as well as if you join the Survivors and Whispers tiers, you can get shout outs at the end of this episode. And clearly, if you're in the Survivors tier, you get to join us on screen, giving your thoughts, dying along the way, laughing as though there was no tomorrow to Kira. You have a very young heart for someone who's very foolhardily foolish. In any case, I've been your host, David Cameo, and I'm joined by Sharon, aka Blazy Gardner, and Bridget, aka Punky Brewster. You can reach at ko-fi.com/Punky Brewster. That's PUNKYBRUISETER, as well as Survivors tier member Takira. Wish her well. You can find her at ko-fi.com/Connie Dixon for life. That's Connie Dixon, the number 4 LYFE. I thought this was a pretty goddamn. I'd never give my impressions of this. I never do. It's not important. Who cares?
You talk
even
the
though this
most out of
episode was
all of us, so it's fine.
What's wrong with that? Anyways, so I thought that this episode was pretty great, even though it was a little bit all over the place. But as you had said, to be expected, we're ramping up. Things are going to start to move since we are in the 3rd episode. With 3 episodes remaining, you kind of have to go that way.
Was that a saw?
It's a
It's a
saw.
saw.
Dennis
Yeah.
is sawing outside.
Okay.
with only 3 episodes remaining.
He's cutting Rick's leg off out there.
Well, now I have to keep that in. It's too good a joke.
What
Only
are you
3
doing with
episodes.
Rick's leg?
Tainted meat. Well, I can't wait to see how this resolves. And if we have more jokes like this at the end of the episode, take care, everybody. We'll see you next week. And for those of you who celebrate,
Bye, guys.
have a solemn and meaningful Yom Kippur
Oh, yeah.
tonight.
I do have one more thing to say about
Goes Rick's other
Carl.
leg.
What about Carl? Is
He was
hot?
the kind of kid who asked for more homework.